Your ideas just don't make sense. You clearly lack the ability to think logically.
You constantly question things that are already settled. These facts have been decided by others. You just need to memorize what I'm teaching you.
You're simply not smart enough to pass the difficult exams. You need to realize by now that you can't handle the harder subjects. There's no point in trying to go further in school.
Your imagination is getting in the way of your education. Your ideas are nothing but distractions. You need to stop dreaming and focus on the facts.
Well, you figured it out. I am Einstein. These phrases echo the words I heard from my teachers and authority figures throughout my youth. Each remark landed like a stone, weighing down my spirit and gradually chipping away at my confidence and creativity. As a child, I wasn't particularly fond of school. I was a curious boy, always questioning the rigid methods of my teachers.
Rigid means something that is very strict or inflexible, not willing to change. Rigid methods refer to teaching ways or practices that are strict, fixed, and do not allow creativity or new ideas. In this context, the teachers had strict, unchanging ways of teaching that didn't allow much room for questions or different ways of thinking.
I was a curious boy, always questioning the rigid methods of my teachers. But in the late 19th century, curiosity wasn't appreciated. They wanted discipline and memorization, qualities I didn't possess. The constant drills suffocated me. Many thought I was slow, even strange. I didn't speak until I was almost 3 years old. And when I did, I had this odd habit of repeating sentences to myself. One of my earliest memories was when my father showed me a compass. I was 5 or 6 and couldn't understand how the needle kept pointing north, no matter how much I moved the compass. That invisible force fascinated me, and it stayed with me throughout my life. By age 16, I could no longer endure the rigid educational system. I decided to leave school without a diploma. Seeking a fresh start, I moved to Switzerland, a country known for its progressive and open-minded educational environment. I believed this new atmosphere would finally allow me to flourish as a thinker. In Switzerland, I encountered professors who encouraged independent thought and creativity. However, even in this more liberating environment, I clashed with authority figures. They said things like, "You'll never succeed if you keep thinking outside the box," and "You can't change the way things are done." After graduation, I struggled to find a job in academia. I spent 2 years unemployed and living in poverty. No university wanted to hire me, and I couldn't even secure a teaching position. A friend helped me get a job as a patent clerk in Bern.
A patent clerk is a person who reviews applications for patents, which are legal documents that give inventors the right to protect their new ideas or inventions. The patent clerk checks if the invention is unique and qualifies for legal protection. Synonyms for a patent clerk are patent examiner or patent reviewer. In this case, Bern refers to the capital city of Switzerland, where his friend helped him get a job in an office to review and process patent applications for new inventions.
A friend helped me get a job as a patent clerk in Bern. I worked there for 7 years. It wasn't the job I wanted, but the routine work gave me the freedom to think and explore my ideas. At 26 years old, I published 4 groundbreaking papers that changed the understanding of physics. These papers were about special relativity, the photoelectric effect, Brownian motion, and mass energy equivalence. Despite these achievements, I continued working as a patent clerk. It wasn't until I received a professorship in Prague that I began to gain recognition from the scientific community. Even then, it took years for my ideas to be fully accepted. My personal life was far from perfect. My first wife, Mileva, and I shared a passion for physics. But my obsession with my work strained our relationship. We had 2 sons, but our marriage couldn't survive. I was not an easy man to live with, and I regret how my family life suffered. In my early years, as my career began to take off, I became increasingly consumed by my research. I remember coming home late, exhausted but excited, only to find Mileva waiting. tired from caring for our two sons. In those moments, I often neglected the simple acts of listening and sharing that are vital in a relationship. Thinking about my sons, Hans Albert and Edward, fills my heart with both joy and regret. As a father, I wanted to guide them, inspire them, and help them find their own paths in life. Yet, I know I wasn't always the father they needed. I recall my time with Hans Albert, my elder son. He had a curious mind, just like mine, and I cherished our moments, exploring the wonders of science and nature together. I would take him for walks, showing him how the world worked, from the beauty of the stars to the mysteries of physics. However, while I tried to support his interests, I often found myself lost in my thoughts, distracted by my work. There were times I could have listened more, spent more time with him, and celebrated his achievements. Then, there was Edward, my younger son. Edward was a sensitive boy with a talent for music and an artistic soul. He often needed more emotional support than I could provide. As he grew older, he faced struggles of his own, particularly with his mental health, eventually being diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia is a serious mental health condition that affects how a person thinks, feels, and behaves. People with schizophrenia may experience symptoms like hearing voices or seeing things that aren't there, known as hallucinations, or having strong beliefs that are not based in reality, called delusions. They might also have difficulty thinking clearly, managing emotions, or interacting with others. Schizophrenia usually starts in late teenage years or early adulthood and requires long-term treatment, which often includes therapy and medication.
As he grew older, he faced struggles of his own, particularly with his mental health, eventually being diagnosed with schizophrenia. I felt helpless at times, wanting to be there for him, but often getting caught up in my research and responsibilities. I regretted that I couldn't always be the attentive father he needed during those difficult times. These challenges were compounded by my eccentric habits. Things that seemed perfectly normal to me, but bewildered others. My untidy desk and peculiar ways of thinking posed challenges for those living with me. I often lost track of time, forgetting important dates or commitments, which caused frustration and disappointment. Ultimately, I struggled to balance my passion for science with my responsibilities as a husband and father. After Mileva and I divorced, I married my cousin, Elsa, who was more understanding of my quirks and eccentricities.
Eccentricities are unusual or strange behaviors or habits that make someone different from others. Quirks are minor, peculiar traits or habits that make a person unique. They're little behaviors or traits that add uniqueness, but they're not big or major parts of their personality.
After Mileva and I divorced, I married my cousin, Elsa, who was more understanding of my quirks and eccentricities. Reflecting on it all, I realized that while my scientific achievements brought me recognition, they often came at a personal cost. My journey taught me to value connection and compassion. It also showed me the need to balance my ambition with family. During these years, I also began to confront my Jewish identity. I wasn't religious in the traditional sense. I didn't believe in a personal God. But as anti-Semitism spread across Europe, I became more aware of my heritage.
Anti-Semitism is when people unfairly treat, dislike, or are hateful towards Jewish people, just because they are Jewish. This kind of unfair treatment has been present in different forms throughout history and became very serious in Europe during Einstein's life. Heritage means a person's cultural and/or family background. Things like traditions, beliefs, or values passed down from previous generations. Here, it means Einstein was becoming more aware of his Jewish background and traditions as anti-Semitism grew in Europe.
I didn't believe in a personal God. But as anti-Semitism spread across Europe, I became more aware of my heritage. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, my life was turned upside down. I had to flee Germany, leaving behind the place I called home, never to return. The Nazis burned my books, labeled my work Jewish physics, and even placed a price on my head. It was one of the darkest times of my life. Perhaps what many people don't realize is how deeply I valued peace. I was a pacifist at heart, After witnessing the horrors of World War I became strongly opposed to war. Yet, I'm forever connected to the creation of the atomic bomb. This is a contradiction I've struggled with for years. In 1939, when it became clear that Nazi Germany was working on nuclear weapons, I co-signed a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, urging him to start the U.S. nuclear program. I feared the consequences of Hitler acquiring such a weapon. This led to the creation of the Manhattan Project, the secret U.S. program to build atomic bombs. However, after the war, the U.S. used these bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, causing massive destruction and loss of life. I was deeply disturbed and horrified by the outcome. Feeling a sense of responsibility because my warning letter had contributed to the creation of the very weapon I abhorred. The guilt of my role in the creation of such a destructive weapon never left me. For the rest of my life, I spoke out against nuclear arms, hoping to prevent the same catastrophe from happening again.
Catastrophe means a sudden and widespread disaster or event that causes great damage, suffering, or destruction. It can refer to natural disasters, like earthquakes and floods, or to man-made disasters, like wars or accidents. In the context of the sentence, it means that Einstein wanted to stop a serious disaster or terrible situation from occurring again.
For the rest of my life, I spoke out against nuclear arms, hoping to prevent the same catastrophe from happening again. It was a strange irony. The mind that once sought to unlock the mysteries of the universe now had to grapple with the moral consequences of its own discoveries. But in the end, I wasn't just a scientist defined by my theories and equations. I was a man, a human being, full of contradictions, failures, and regrets. While my mind brought me fame, it was my heart that often felt the weight of my choices and the world's suffering. Still, despite these burdens, I look back on my life with a sense of wonder. My journey wasn't about perfection or success. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: never let others set boundaries for your potential. Throughout life, people will try to confine you, label you, and tell you what is or isn't possible. But you must Keep questioning, keep imagining, and keep believing in your own ability to think and dream.